Introducing our panelists here, I want to say hello to two of our students, Maya Gerster, who's a junior, Catherine Goldstuck, who's a sophomore. We have an alum who happens to work in our office as a presidential fellow, Catherine Laws, and she'll talk to you a little bit about what that role is like. And then we've got Mercy Iadiel, who oversees our Chief Corporate Engagement Officer, as well as all of the college to career education on the business school side, as well as our alumni on the business school side, a lot of different roles that she plays. And she and I have worked together for a long time, including when we both worked at Stanford before. And then finally, Heidi Robinson, who is our assistant vice president and our associate professor of the practice in the education department, where she teaches a bunch of college to career courses that we will be talking about a little bit further today. So today we're going to talk to you about the Office of Personal Career Development and the college to career journey for students at Wake Forest. And it's different for every student, but it is one where I can tell you that we are so committed to make sure that every student feels career ready, will be career successful, and just feels really confident about being able to manage this process and learn a lot about how to handle not only how do I get a great first job coming out of Wake Forest, but all the transitions over the rest of their lives. How do they actually be strategic about them, thoughtful about them? How do they start to build a network of people who can be helpful to them? That is something that we really are committed to. So I'm going to interview each one of our panelists a little bit. I think I'll first start with Heidi, and then she'll interview our students, and then we'll come back to Mercy and to Catherine. All righty. So Heidi, why don't you just give a high-level overview of just how the OPCD works with students? And in particular, I know one of the things we talk about is being career ready. And can you also talk about that too?
Absolutely. One of the things I would want every parent to know is that we are a part of your child's Wake Forest journey from the moment they step on campus. We're part of their orientation. And if you ask them, I'll be curious to know if they were watching us and learning how to do their handshake profile virtually, because they've already walked through some of these steps, and it's important for you to know and for them to recognize their own beginning progress. When we say at Wake Forest that we educate the whole person, we believe that personal and career development is a very big part of that. And so at Wake Forest, when we think about career and life readiness, we've developed our own organic model of career and life readiness that we developed with your children in mind. And so students walk through these 7 steps that then we know they're ready to transition into life after Wake Forest. So self-awareness, career awareness, personal branding, interviewing. We want them to start thinking about networking and relationship building, professional skills, and then finally, life and leadership. It's that whole person concept. And so all of our career education, it rotates around the center, or it rotates through this model. And that's what we use to sort of think of when we want to know that your child is starting this process. And then we know how we want to lead them through so that they're ready when they're ready, when it's time to transition.
Great. Heidi, what is sort of a couple things that if first year students might engage in to get started with the office?
Wonderful. One of the first things that I would want our first year students to know, and for you to know as parents, is that there is a thought process among first year students that in order to come through our door or to have an appointment, that they have to know all the answers, that they have to know what they're interested in, what they want to major in, and that is just not true. Our role is to help them walk through those thought processes and also for them to think about the ways they can explore those different pieces around that with us, with support and with structure. And so I would say as a first year student, I'd want them to come in. We have group appointments that are just for first year students to go ahead and begin building that first college resume. We have group appointments where they can learn about all of our resources, and they can do that. And it's a social experience. And in particular, this semester, that's one of those things that has been really important for our students to do, to learn that they are going through this process of learning about themselves and careers with their cohort of other students who are on campus with them.
Great. And then in terms of doing it now during COVID, can you do it virtually? Can you do it in person? How do you make an appointment? That kind of thing.
I love that you asked that question. Everything that we have done in our office now takes place virtually. And one of the things that we could not have anticipated is student reaction. And students have loved the access that they can have and the speed with which they can connect to career support using Zoom and going ahead and making their appointments through Handshake. Handshake is our platform for opportunities. It's also the place where your student can go ahead and make their appointment with a career coach. They can have a resume review Monday through Thursday, and they can have access to coaches every day of the week. And there are so many different kinds of appointments that they can access. And the last thing I think I'd want the first year students to know is that it really never is too early to go ahead and get started. And that a little bit of momentum helps go into the spring with some extra confidence. And so they could begin that right now and actually during this break they have ahead of them.
Great. One of the things about Handshake I will mention too is that when a student completes their profile, they tell us what they're interested in. Based on those interests, we're able to send them directed information so that they don't get a lot of spam email. And also, if they change their minds, they'll get new kinds of information. So it is our way of being able to customize and tailor our support and our resources and our communication to them. So I do think that's one thing that students, if they don't want to miss anything and they also want to get things that are really relevant to them, that's one way to do it. Also, they're able to set up job search agents or internship agents so that if they select certain areas of interest, those will get pushed to them, just like it would on a job board if you were using LinkedIn or something like that. And so that's too another thing that is really important for students to be aware of and know about. One of the things that actually I want to make sure if any of you have questions, there is a Q&A board. I know some of you have asked questions in advance and we're going to try to answer these along the way. So let's see, in terms of something that does happen, I think oftentimes the world is telling students, choose a major so that'll lead to a job. And so it's really important that you pick the right major. And if you don't get that right major, then you won't be able to get a good job. Can you talk a little bit about how we think about that and how actually it's really not that, but I think it's important for you to sort of communicate what we're communicating to students so parents know what we're thinking.
Absolutely. One of the things that we really like to say is that a major does not guarantee nor preclude you from the vast majority of career opportunities. In fact, it's a flexible tool in that student's hand. One of the things that we really love to say, and I could probably have Maya or Catherine, I would even have to ask you to, you can guess what I'm about to say, which is you're not married to your major. Your major doesn't define your career path. In other words, students often come in and they think if I major in psychology, I'll become a psychologist. Maybe, but you also might be fabulous in marketing. And so what we like students to begin to do is to think flexibly about the skills that they're developing in that major, study what they love, which means that what will happen is that their grades will be higher. Opportunities will be easier to pursue with a confidence in that grade point that they will also develop. Secondarily, I would say students need to have a fluency in where different majors actually go. We have on our website a whole host of years and pages and lots of data regarding all of our majors and where our students go after they graduate. I would say, parents, that's a wonderful place for you to begin to see for yourselves what different majors which majors open different doors for students. And I would say it's often surprising for students to say, oh, there's an art history major who's in consulting at Deloitte. Oh, there's a history major who's on Wall Street. Yes, these things are all true. So we emphasize this to students, particularly as they are first years. To Andy's point, they often feel as if they pick the wrong major, it's all blown. But that's just simply not true. We say not only are you not married to your major, I'm not sure you're engaged. It is definitely something you like, and you will study and gain skills from that major. But your career path is something different that you'll build along the way with experiences that you have.
Yeah, one of the things that I think about oftentimes is that college is a great opportunity to put a tool belt around your waist, of which then you can fill that tool belt with lots of tools. One of those happens to be what you study, but there's all these other things that you can do. And we're going to talk in a second about internships and experiences, but you can actually get a lot of other types of technical and professional skills, whether it be through LinkedIn Learning, which is a service that all students at Wake Forest have an opportunity to access and basically take all of these great courses about all different types of topics, whether it be about SQL, Java, data science, Excel. Like there's all these different kinds of skills that may not have anything to do with your major, but could be another tool you put into your tool belt that makes you able to sell yourself when you actually are in interviews, or may actually open up doors and ideas of things that you might be interested in that you weren't even seeing in your major. So I do think that's something we talk about, is make sure you're actually doing everything you can to sort of fill that tool belt with as many tools as you can. The second thing though is about internships and experiences. So that's a big question that a lot we received from parents beforehand. Can you talk a bit about, one is, how important is it to have internships like every summer of college? And are there other alternatives to internships that are also valuable? We talk about getting experiences. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I mean, experience comes in all shapes and sizes, and often there's a myopic vision of what that would look like. And students sometimes think if it's not an internship at a big company that's defined as an internship, it doesn't count as professional experience. And so, two things that I would say: one, all experience counts, paid or unpaid, it's professional experience. So, that can happen in a nonprofit, that can happen in an on campus job, that can happen in some of the clubs and organizations in which our students participate. So that's one piece. The other thing the students often don't realize that they can do is that there's an online project-based resource called Parker Dewey, where students can actually go on and pick up projects that they could be doing over this winter break. That's another interesting way for them to go ahead and gain professional experience. It's called a micro internship. Job shadows, externships, which are just sort of an extended job shadow. All of these are different ways where they can be gaining experience. And then finally, Andy, I love that you brought up LinkedIn Learning, because as I look here across our Zoom, both Catherine and Maya have taken LinkedIn Learning courses, and that is another great way for students to have a story to tell about their own professional growth.
Great, thank you for that. Um, let's see, another question is asked is just about a virtual internship. Like, is an internship valuable if it's virtual versus not?
Oh my goodness, absolutely. I love that question. That's an easy low and across the plate. Absolutely. It doesn't matter if it's virtual or in person, those skills are still critical. What we want students doing is building, Andy, you referenced a tool belt of skills. A virtual internship is a fabulous way for a student to gain not only those professional skills doing the work and the projects, it's also a great way for a student to become competent in this virtual space in which we find ourselves. They may have a job that's virtual at some point, and they will certainly interact with people around the globe. So there are all sorts of different skills and competencies that come through a virtual internship just as surely as if they were in the office.
That's great. I agree with that completely. And one of the things that also, I think oftentimes, in fact, it's interesting, one of our students I was just talking to before this call about his desire to work for like a big brand name company because everyone knows the company and knows the products, and my parents will understand what that company is. And as he was talking, he realized at the same time, he said, but the thing about it is there's a lot of formality and hierarchy in those places. It's very competitive to get in there because everyone's applying around the country to these jobs. So the chances of getting those jobs are really low. And so he was asking me like, would it be okay for me to work at a smaller, like less known company? And if I did, like, does that actually prevent me from going to work for a big company someday down the road? And I was just saying, no, actually, sometimes actually working in smaller places. And he actually said from his own experience from the summer, I got a ton of responsibility. I did things that people, in totally different areas around the company because they needed the help. And I know so much more than if I just had this very narrow job. And so that was one of those interesting things that sometimes we can get caught up in, I have to work at the big brand name company to actually have any legitimacy and credibility on my resume. But the number of Wake alums who I've seen to go work at places that you didn't know their names their first year out of college, and then before you know it, they're at all these big name companies now, working there. When you look at our alumni directory, they're all working at, name the company, Google, Hulu, Facebook, Salesforce. And you're like, how did you get there? Like, oh, I worked at these couple small places and got experience to get to that bigger place. It's like that with internships too, right?
Oh, it absolutely is. And in fact, what I would say is sometimes those smaller areas, those startups, even nonprofits, they're so much more flexible in the kinds of responsibilities that they'll allow you to take on as a young person. And in
Yeah.
that more formal corporate structure, there are probably some rules around who can do marketing, and it's a more defined space. Whereas in that startup or in that nonprofit, there's just a lot more flexibility and latitude to be able to get a lot more experience and perhaps even gain some skills that you may not even know that you need down the road, but end up being tremendously valuable.
Great. Well, I'm going to pass it over to you to let you have an opportunity to interview Catherine Goldstuck and Maya, and then we'll come back to Mercy and Catherine Laws.
Oh, thank you, Andy. And thank you, Catherine and Maya, for being here with us. I know that you both have had busy days. Hello, Wake Forest students, right? So I'm delighted that you're with us. I'd first like to ask you both to unmute, and if you will, to go ahead and introduce yourselves, where you're from, your year, and kind of the things maybe that you're thinking about right now in terms of your career path.
I can kick it off. My name is Maya Gerster. I am a junior at Wake. I'm from Greenwich, Connecticut, and I am an econ major with minors in both entrepreneurship and psychology. Currently, I am pursuing the consulting path, but that definitely was not where I started. I started out at Wake as pre-med, so little pivot right there.
Thank you, Maya. Catherine?
Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine Goldstuck. I'm a sophomore. I'm also from Greenwich, Connecticut. And I haven't declared my major yet because sophomores declare next semester, but I'm an intended double major in philosophy and politics and then art history minor. Didn't always start off that way. I've sort of gone back and forth with that trio of how I wanted to organize it, but that's what I've decided on. And as for future career path, I'm debating the idea of potentially going to law school somewhere down the road, pursuing a career in law, maybe working for a lobbyist firm, anything in that sort of sector.
You've gotten very policy oriented, Catherine. And what I love hearing both of you talk is that you, as first years, you entered with sort of a different way of thinking about career. And I'd love for you to share how your process has sort of taken on its own flavor, and you have really tailored this to your own evolving interests.
Yeah, so I've definitely had a big shift between when I entered as a freshman at Wake and then now, where I feel like I have a more definitive path of what I want to do and how to get there. So I was originally going to double major in philosophy and art history, and I always wanted to work in the art field. The summer before my freshman year at Wake, I interned at an art gallery, and I really enjoyed it. So I was pretty set on that. And then in the spring of my freshman year, so last spring, I took Heidi's class called College to Career Choices, where we interview Wake alumni working in different fields that we're interested in. They're called informational interviews, and they were really helpful, not so much in that they showed me what I wanted to do, but what I didn't want to do, which is another, like, sort of, you don't expect that that's what you're going to get out of it, but I'm very glad that I did, because the majority of the interviews that I conducted were with alumnus in the art world, and after hearing their stories, I sort of realized that I didn't really want to enter that field after all. So I'm very glad that I had that experience.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Catherine.
kind of piggybacking off of that, I came into Wake as a pre-med student, dead set on being a doctor, and went through my whole freshman year. My parents actually met Heidi at a call to conversation, and so while I did not take the college to career courses until my sophomore fall, I still was in the OPCD probably every other Friday for drop-in hours and in Heidi's office all the time. And I had never intended on majoring in a hard science, even when I was pre-med. And so I had been taking a spattering of other courses, and after an internship in between my freshman and sophomore year in the medical field, I realized that I didn't love the coursework. I just loved the idea of being a doctor. And so it definitely was hard. I won't say it was easy to let go of an idea that I had of what I was going to do for so long. But my sophomore fall, I was in Heidi's college to career courses. I took an econ course with one of my favorite professors, and really decided to pivot. And it was Heidi that had been telling me all along, you'd be a great consultant. You'd be a great consultant. And so now just recently, I actually did accept an internship with Accenture for next summer in their consulting division. So everything works out the way it's supposed to, I guess. And yeah, that's kind of how I got here.
And congratulations, by the way, Maya. That's new news, and so we are all cheering for you right here. And I guess what I hear in both of what the stories that you're sharing, that you started out in one space and you needed a little bit of time to sort of navigate what it was that actually sort of raised your energy and caught your attention. Catherine, would you say that the time was important, a little bit of time to explore and understand?
Definitely. I think being exposed to so many options through not only the OPCD, but also different platforms that the OPCD encourages, such as LinkedIn and Handshake and all of those really useful tools, definitely opened my eyes to some options that I really didn't know were there. I had always assumed that if I wanted to do, I always knew I wanted to study philosophy because that's been a passion of mine since high school, but I kind of assumed that since I don't want to go into business that I would have to become a lawyer. And I didn't know if I necessarily wanted to become a lawyer. So seeing the different potentials and like going down that path really opened my eyes to much more options.
And Maya, I appreciate what Catherine just said, and it makes me think a little bit about that, what we call the dreaded question, and how it sort of feels, and sort of the ways that we have thought about, for both of you, really answering that dreaded question. If you could speak to what it is, and then maybe some ways people can help their student develop an answer.
Yeah, so the dreaded question kind of comes in a few forms, but usually it's, what do you want to do when you graduate? Where are you going to work? Things like that. And I came to despise that question very quickly. You know, I'm very fortunate to have super supportive parents that have given me free reign to explore any career option that I want. And so my answer to that question slowly became, well, I'm taking classes in X, Y, and Z, and I'm looking in opportunities in this field and this field, but I'm open to pursuing anything. And that is what drove my answers and led me to an internship later on that I did this past summer. So it's definitely a hard question to answer, but you don't have to have some kind of definitive answer by saying like, oh, I know I'm going to be, an investment banker or a doctor or anything like that. You don't have to say that. It's just expressing your interests and what you like and what you love, because that'll eventually lead you to the career path that you want to go down.
Nice, a strategic answer so people can help you, right? So people can begin to come alongside you. That's perfect. I love that answer. And especially as we head toward Thanksgiving and having family gatherings where a student can have that answer. Catherine, if you were going to give parents of first years some advice or some things to think about, some advice on how to either help their child or things that you think their child could be doing that would be helpful in this first year, what would you say?
I would say definitely engage with the OPCD and don't be afraid or intimidated if you don't really know like why you're there. I think the first time that I sort of walked into the OPCD, I honestly didn't really know why I was there because I hadn't figured out how I wanted to coordinate my major minor situation, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I was like, well, what am I doing here? But it's like you have to sort of just dive in, even if you don't know, because that's sort of one of the ways that you can sort of solidify your interests. And I think it's always better to have a path. It doesn't have to be a narrow path, but I think it's always beneficial to sort of like know where you're going in the future.
And the last thing I would say is one of the things that you both did coming out of your first semester and second semester of your first years is that you both developed a resume, a college resume. You transitioned. And I really saw that shift your confidence. And I wonder if you could speak to that.
Yeah, I can. That was probably the first thing I worked on in the OPCD. With Heidi, I showed up with my high school resume, which looked like a bullet pointed list of every single thing I had ever accomplished in high school. And we totally reworked my resume. It's been reworked, I mean, since I was a freshman, a countless number of times. Um, but it has given me such a high level of confidence in being able to give my resume to an interviewer and know that it's really great. And I don't mean that in like in a bragging way. I really do mean that in a more modest way. But knowing that coming out of Wake and with the resources the OPCD has, we talk about these action statements and making sure that you quantify your experiences, things like that. I never would have known to do that right off the bat. And I think something I learned having just gone through a pretty hefty interview process is that it pays off to have a great resume. And that's something that companies really appreciate. And so even just as a parent of a first year, encouraging your child to go and just make a resume review appointment, it's 30 minutes and it's the best 30 minutes. And then you just continue to make follow-up appointments. And that's kind of how you find yourself stuck in the OPCD, but it's a great place to be stuck.
It's a great place to be stuck. I just appreciate you both. And Catherine, both of you came out with pretty good looking professional resumes out of your first year. And I remember you saying you brought someone else in with you. That's my favorite part of the Catherine Goldstuck first year story is, do you want to speak to what you did?
Yeah, I brought like 3 friends with me to office hours because I came back from my first meeting and I was talking to my friends about it, and they were all like, I need that. So I think I showed up to office hours the next Friday with like at least 3 friends, and we all worked on our resumes together, and then we all felt so good after. We felt so prepared.
I just remember all of you walking out with smiles on your faces, which really, for me, was a sign of your confidence. And that made me really excited. It makes me excited for all of our first years who can be doing some of these very same things. And Catherine and Maya, I just so appreciate you both being here, sharing your experience. And I just appreciate how you continue to build your own professional careers at Wake. Thank you both.
Thank you very much for being here and sharing your stories, and just hearing just in the confidence and how you have a sense for what you're doing, even though it's not fully answered, but you're on the way. And I can sense that just by listening to you, and I really appreciate that. It's really interesting. One of the things that one of the parents asked was sort of how you ended up engaging with the OPCD, and you did a great job just there, just saying, well, actually, just got my resume looked at in 30 minutes. And so that seems like an easy way to get started. It also seems like, and we are doing this right now. I mean, we have more appointments with students than ever being virtual. And actually the reason being, Heidi's talked about this before, is students actually don't have to cross campus and come to the office. They can actually just pick up their, be on the phone and just sort of be on with us wherever they might be. And that's actually created more convenience, even though we'd all love to be in person for sure. But the fact that we're not, doing it in person, doing it virtual has actually worked really quite well. And I love actually the idea of like, bring a friend. Like the other thing is that, being able to do it with someone else is also of great value, which actually is very related a little bit with Catherine's story. So I look forward to now asking Catherine a few questions. Okay. All right. So we're gonna talk to Catherine. As I mentioned, she's a presidential fellow, graduated class of 2020. And maybe Catherine, just briefly describe what is a presidential fellow and how did you decide to do this job instead of maybe doing something else?
Sure. Thank you, Andy. So Dr. Hatch started the Presidential Fellow Program back in 2008. So we're in the 12th year. And the Fellows Program is an opportunity for a recent Wake Forest graduate to, in their first year post-grad, get to have a full-time one-year position with Wake Forest Higher Administration. So our fellows are in offices across the university. I'm here in the OPCD. One of the fellows is in the president's office. There's a fellow in the office of the dean of the college. There's one at the medical center. So it's a very diverse group in terms of interest and our career choices, which makes it a really fun one to be a part of.
Great. And then when you've been doing a lot of different kinds of work for the OPCD, can you give a little bit of an overview and some things you're learning from it?
Sure. So my role is actually about half of it is a marketing and communications role. And so I'm working with Austin Wechter, who is in charge of our marketing for the OPCD. I'm running our social media. I'm getting to be a part of some targeted messaging to students. And was just on a call today about a new kind of way of messaging this one group of students. And so it's exciting to get to be a part of this during the time when our communication strategies are really different than they were before the virus. We're responding to the fact that students have way more in their email inboxes than they even did before. And so we're trying to be creative about our communications. And so it's just really fun for me. To get to be here at a time like this. And then the other part of my role is actually a rotational program around the OPCD. So I began with Heidi and our career coaching team and got to do some student-facing work, getting to actually learn a little bit of the coaching side and among other things, and really enjoyed that. I'm currently with our Mentoring Resource Center and our Alumni Personal and Career Development Center, actually getting to do a lot of writing. That's the one thing that I would pull out of this role, which I really enjoy. I was an English major and journalism minor at Wake, and so I'm glad to get to practice my writing in a professional setting. And then after Thanksgiving, I've headed to our employer relations team. So I'm learning a lot. I'm getting real world experience. I'm getting to practice project management. I'm getting to actually manage one of our career assistants who's a student. And so getting some actual management experience. I am learning new skills like Adobe Creative Suite and data and analytics that I never got to dip into before. And the biggest thing too is just for my personal vocational direction, learning what I like and what I don't like. I'm learning, for example, I really like to help students and be a part of that process. And I came in kind of thinking that I was interested in magazine journalism and like a full-time writing job. So through my experiences, I'm kind of learning what I like and what I don't like and getting a lot of clarity on that.
So I actually was going to ask you a different question, but one of the reasons why I wanted you to explain what you do is to give parents out there sort of an example of a kind of job that students could get, even continuing of working at Wake Forest or staying at Wake Forest a little bit longer. So I think that was just one of the reasons why. The other thing actually would be interesting is talk about your story about how you didn't come to the OPCD and then you actually did. Like, what was going on with you that kept you from engaging with the Office of Personal Development, and then what made the difference to get you to engage? Because we know a lot of students, for different reasons, are hesitant. So maybe you can share that story.
Right. And I definitely was one of those students. My first and second year at Wake, I was scared to walk into the OPCD because I didn't have a plan. I think it was either Catherine or Maya who kind of mentioned that. I thought that I needed to know what I wanted to do and have it all planned out. I thought I needed to impress the career coaches for some reason. And that's just not true. But so I think I was hesitant because I was sort of in this mode of analysis paralysis, I would say. I felt like I had too many options, too many things that I was interested in, didn't even know where to start. And I actually got kind of desperate. I think it was the summer before my sophomore year. I knew I needed a resume for the sophomore internship that I was applying to. And so I was sitting next to a friend while we were studying, and I said, I don't even know how to make an appointment to get my resume reviewed. I know that the OPCD does that, but how do I even begin? And he just helped me open my laptop and log into Handshake and make an appointment to get my resume looked at, and that was it. And that was kind of what got me into the door to experience great coaching and to experience great reflection and help with my cover letter, help with the process of applying to the fellowship actually my senior year. And so I think the real lesson from that is when we don't know where to begin, sometimes we just need someone to help us take the first step. My friend didn't need to walk me to the door. He didn't need to walk me through the door. He didn't need to sit down with a coach. alongside of me. He just needed to help me get started. And that was enough to help me take off.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. And it's great to have you on the team. You've done amazing work at helping us make sure we understand how students think, and how to communicate well to them and make sure we're delivering the right things for them given where they are right now. So you've been really terrific. I'm going to shift over to Mercy, as Mercy can talk a little bit with us about what's happening out in the marketplace. And I thought, Mercy, maybe it's just to start. You and I have been in this world for a while, and one of the things that I think about is just sort of college recruiting, career services. You see a lot in the employment market. What are some of the big changes that you're seeing that are just helpful for parents to be aware of, as to, this world of trying to get from college to career is very different than it was when, we went to college, many years ago. It'd be great to just talk a little bit about what are some of the new things that are happening now.
Well, not that many years ago. Come on.
Sadly, yeah.
No, it's wonderful to be here tonight. Hello to Wake Forest parents. It's always good to be in your presence. I see we've got about 140 of you on the call, so thank you so much for signing in tonight. Andy, thank you for that question. It was interesting to kind of reflect back on the last 20 to 25 years to see how things have really evolved from the world of work perspective. And one of the things that immediately I noticed is that, we talk a lot about the digital evolution, if you will, or digital transformation. And now it's like digital acceleration for sure. And we've seen that in the last year. And when you think about the broad landscape of the world of work, it really comes down to three primary things that I've seen change or evolve. One is how people work. They can work from anywhere. There's a lot of flexibility, telecommuting. It's really, technology has enabled us to do that in so many ways. How we learn and build skills has also changed quite a bit. We're doing a lot of that online. It used to be that, back in the day, we'd go to a conference to try to build some skills or a workshop, but now we can do all of that online. And then also how we access talent, I think, is a pretty big shift, which, now that we're enabling folks to be able to do Zoom interviews and really to be able to connect on a global scale, it's pretty phenomenal to see the access that this current time has enabled us to have. And I can talk a little bit more about from the employers and the student perspective too, but that's what I'll share to get us started.
All right, that's great. That's great. Well, we might come back to it if we have time.
Sure.
I think it's really great to just talk a little bit about, our team works with a lot of employers.
Yes.
Can you give just a sense of what are the kinds of employers we work with? And also, we'll talk a little bit about just how COVID has made things like better and worse for us too. But first talk about the kinds of employers that we get to work with at Wake Forest and who are our students.
Sure. Well, let me say this too, because we do have parents on the call, and I just want to make a plug for Wake Forest parents. We really consider you a part of our secret sauce to our success. Many of you make it possible for us to have really strong recruiting relationships at many of the best companies around the world. So let me just put in a plug for any of you who may be looking for Wake Forest talent. We certainly want to be talking with you. Wake has about 400 or so unique employers that have hired our students, just the class of 2020. And that's a pretty phenomenal number when you think about how many employers, with a wide range of industries, everything from education, government, technology, healthcare, financial services, so many more that really want to recruit Wake Forest talent. Just to give you a really quick flavor of the kinds of companies that recruit Wake Forest students or organizations, Amazon, McKinsey, Goldman Sachs, you've got National Institute of Health, the federal government, Teach for America, Nike, PepsiCo, and the list goes on and on. And, there's even arts, roles where, students have gone on to pursue jobs with the National Gallery of the Arts. I mean, it's pretty phenomenal when you think about the reach of organizations that you can find Wake Forest talent, really anywhere in the world. As you think about our team, we're really a full service recruiting operation. So if you have talent needs, we can help you with full-time talent, internships, and we have a number of events that happen throughout the year that are recruiting events. And I will tell you that given this time, our access and exposure has greatly expanded because we have so many more employers that are able to access Wake Forest talent through technology. So it's really been phenomenal. And we'd love to work with you in your organization.
That's really really helpful to hear about all that. One of the things I don't know, I don't think you mentioned, just in terms of just service level, like the kind of feedback we get from employers. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's something we really pride ourselves on.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that we use is a national kind of scorecard. I think many of you are probably familiar with it. It's called the NPS. And it's basically at its essence, would you recommend this group or service or product to someone else? That's at the heart of it. And we typically will score anywhere between 67 to 74 at our highest. And we're quite proud of that. Of course, if you talk to my mother, she'd be like, that doesn't sound so good because that's way below 100. So I have to educate mom on what this means. But if you think about that range, 67 to 74, that's in par with many of the companies like Ritz-Carlton, JetBlue, Zappos. It's very, very difficult to achieve really, I think, anything above a 60. So we feel really strong about that. We consistently get feedback from our employer community on how much they love recruiting at Wake Forest, and in particular, our talent.
Can you also talk just briefly about what employers mostly say about Wake Forest students, just in general, the positive feedback they give to us about how they see Wake Forest students?
Absolutely. Well, the number one thing we consistently hear is the work ethic. We feel a lot of our employers mention that time and time again. And they also mention, in particular with this landscape of diversity, equity, and inclusion, how quickly our students are able to adapt in their working environments and to be able to relate to other folks. So really strong team players and leaders. And in many cases, being at the heart of new initiatives. I mean, usually if there's something new to be done, it's typically going to be the Wake Forest grad that gets that project or the assignment, because there's a lot of degree of confidence and dependability in getting it done and getting it done well.
Great. Yeah, that's one of the things that I just find has been really fun for us at Wake Forest, to be able to work with such amazing students who, through the experience of being at Wake Forest, their work ethic and their interpersonal skills, their teamwork skills, their
Yes.
ability to really think critically and communicate really well bodes really positively for all of our students. Oftentimes, I just feel like if we can just make sure they are career ready, and I emphasize that a bit earlier in one of the Q&A answers, was students, if they get to a place like where Maya got to, where she has confidence in her resume, she can talk about what she's interested in and why, she knows how to actually connect with people, like the ability to get the job really can come together. Most of the reasons why we hear from employers why they won't hire people is that they'll say the student didn't do enough research, or their materials weren't so great, and it didn't come across professionally enough, and they weren't super clear about why they would want to work with my firm. They didn't do enough research, or they didn't really sort of get their story straight. And so I do think, a lot of this stuff for a lot of adults is common sense after a while, but we forget how many interviews or conversations we've had that enable us to do that, and college students are just learning it for the very first time. I'm going to ask you one other question just to make sure, because you also oversee stuff that happens at the business school. Quite a few students actually have some interest in the business school. And can you talk a bit about the process, just to give people a sense for like what do students need to do to make sure they can get there? But then also, if they don't get there, how do they still make sure they're very employable?
Absolutely. Well, I'll talk a little bit about the process. The application process for School of Business is in the spring semester of the sophomore year. And I'll just go ahead and share this with parents, that it's very important for students to pay attention to their GPA and to their academic performance, because it is very, very competitive. Just to give you a sense of that competitiveness, last year's class average GPA was 3.6 in the application process. So that gives you a sense of how competitive it is. Now, you can apply to the business school with a 2.85, I believe, GPA, so there is that minimum. But to really be competitive, you want to make sure you're paying attention to your academic performance. There are 4 prerequisite courses that are required. So you've got econ, math stats, accounting, and a BEM class that's required. And so we do encourage, obviously, students to take those classes on the front end as quickly as possible so that they're the most competitive in the process. Now, having said that, many students don't get into the business school. And quite honestly, that is okay. Being someone that champions our employers and works with the market, I know that the market really values majors across the spectrum. In fact, this is an important milestone time for us. We're just crossing or about to cross over our 6-month post-graduation employment mark. And Andy and Heidi and I are very pleased to share that we're right around 93% of our students in the college who have achieved their first destination. And guess what? And don't tell the dean of the business school, my other boss, but we're right at 93% for the business school kids too. So you see that both sets of students are very competitive in the market space. So if your student does not get into the business school, it doesn't mean that they can't have a very solid, competitive career path. The other thing I'll say is there's many programs that the School of Business offers outside of a degree structure. We have a summer management program that's offered obviously through the summer weeks. It's about an 8 to 10 week program, and they get a lot of great business skills and some practical experiences to help them build their business mindset. We also have a new sports biz marketing program as well that I think is an exceptional program. This was the first year that we launched that. It's all virtual this year, but we hope to be back in person soon. And then, of course, if your student is interested in pursuing more graduate studies, we do have very competitive one-year master's programs that generally we're north of 95% or so employment rate for those programs. So we've got a lot of competitive opportunities outside of the undergraduate business school option. But of course, I want all your students to consider the business school, but we certainly try to make a lot of options available across the spectrum.
Thanks, Mercy. The other thing I'll mention too is that entrepreneurship is one of the most popular minors, so students can actually minor in entrepreneurship as a way to learn business skills.
That's right.
We have obviously a lot of students like to major in econ. That also can be helpful. We have the Wake West program, as well as the Wake Washington program as ways for you to get internship experience as well as academic credit. And then also the Global Studies Office has international programs with some other schools when those are working, not right now, in general, where you can actually do internships and get some work experience in other countries. So there's a lot of different ways you can get like hands-on work experience that make you be sort of more exposed to business-like practices that aren't necessarily having to study business at school. So just want to make sure that that's an option. If you're worried about that, don't think and make sure your student doesn't think if you don't go to business school, like you won't be able to get a business job. We've had quite a few college students, we're getting all the numbers right now, who have gone to work in consulting and banking and all these other kinds of really sort of jobs that you tend to think business school students can only get, but actually our college liberal arts students can get them too. So there was a couple other questions that came through that I thought maybe we could try to answer. I thought, Heidi, maybe you could just talk about students might want to go to grad school like pre-med or law, and does doing this career ready work actually matter? Like why would that be important?
It matters a lot. I love that question. And Maya was jumping to answer the question too. I love this question. Yes, it matters. One, it matters, I would say, there are a couple different levels. One, from a personal level, we want that student to be able to speak to why that path matters for them. and to be able to identify the values and the interests and the kinds of things that are actually leading them on that path, because many of those different paths will require a number of years from them. So we want them to be certain that that's where they want to go. So I would say from a personal perspective, that's very important, the whole career readiness piece. Second, in order to be a great candidate, they need professional experience. What does that mean? It means that if someone wants to go ahead and go to medical school, they need to be developing a story professionally that proves to that medical school that they are indeed committed. In order to get those opportunities, to be able to do those different things, they're going to need a great resume. They're going to need a LinkedIn profile, and they're going to need a handshake to be able to get those opportunities to help build professional momentum. And then finally, for the vast majority of the kinds of schools that our students are interested in, they're going to interview. That is certainly true of medical schools. It is certainly true of law schools, and a host of other different kinds of professional opportunities in graduate or professional school. They need those skills to be able to interview well. A lot of times students think, oh, I can wing it. Now Wake Forest students, they know better. They know that the best things happen when you prepare and you work hard. And so that's what we really provide, as an opportunity for them to be sure that they're ready for those things. So my answer is, indeed, it does matter. Come to us and let us help you.
And one of the things that you and I teach a lot of times is even before thinking about graduate school, being clear about the reason why you're going to graduate school and what that will lead to afterwards. So this is another thing I think a lot of people who are of older generations than current students is that they tend to have an idea as to what grad school doors open, but it's changed and it's different. And so because of that, they might have an assumption based on what it was like 20 years ago, and it's different now. And so that's really important. Also, we have students who oftentimes think, I'll go to grad school to figure out what I want to do. But oftentimes you're not going to get time to figure out what you want to do because they expect you to know. So by doing like informational interviewing with people who have gone to grad school to understand like what are they doing or what are those careers like, it'll give you more information. You know, how much do I really want to go to grad school? Like, again, making sure like this is a right step in the place where you're trying to head. And so I do think that's another thing that we can help students think through by going through this process. We only have a couple minutes left. I think one is just how long is the OPCD available during winter break? So maybe Heidi, could you give a quick answer to that?
Oh, I sure can happily answer that question. Students can access appointments. They can access all of the different kinds of resources we have, including resume reviews. We've talked a lot about getting that resume started. They can have those all the way through, right past finals and all into that beginning, early part of that break. And then we'll pick up again. And parents, this is the thing I would really love for you to know, is that starting on January 11th, that entire week, we have very special programming that we have been thinking about to help students really get a jump start on the spring. That includes working on their resumes, exploring different kinds of careers, talking about graduate school. But we have something at 4 o'clock every single day that week, and it's all been planned for your students. So we would love to have them going ahead and marking that on their calendar so that we can see them there.
So all that information will be available on our website. We'll have that up, and so know that that's there. And if you've registered for Handshake or one of the career pathways, like you'll get that information there. So your students should be getting that information. But I think the number one thing is make sure they're registered on Handshake, and we know what their interests are. So I'm going to ask every panelist just one word, one phrase as what would be a word of advice you'd give to a parent who has a first-year student who is probably not really begun the process or trying to figure it out? What's a word or phrase or piece of advice? So Mercy, can I start with you? You got a word or phrase or piece of advice to a parent?
Just breathe. Just breathe.
Breathe.
We're going to make it.
Okay.
That's right.
Nice. I like that. All right, great. How about you, Catherine?
I'd say help your student just break it down so that they can take one first step.
Take one first step. Nice. Maya, what do you think?
I think don't close yourself off to opportunities that you may not have thought about.
There you go. Yeah, keep a lot of options open, like be in exploration and be open to many options. That's great. I love that. Heidi?
I would want your student to be reminded that they have been courageous this entire semester. They have had incredible discipline. They have done things that we have not had, no other first-year class has been asked to do. And if they can do that, they can come on in for a resume review. They're ready to go ahead and step outside of their comfort zone because they've been doing that since they got here, and they are to be commended.
Yeah, thank you, Heidi. And I'll just say, believe in them and encourage them that no matter how stressed they may feel or you may feel, or that the world is coming around you, just believe in them and encourage them to just say, take that first step, as Catherine said, be open, just be open to the possibilities, because the world is changing, and what the cool jobs that might exist today might not be exactly here even in 4 years, and new cool things might come up that could be even more cool than we've ever imagined. So I have hope in that. I do believe that actually our Wake Forest students have great possibilities and potential, great talent, and we love working with them. So please send them our way. We love the opportunity to get to know you all a little bit better, at least sharing some of our story with you, and we hope we'll get to see you sometime in person back on campus. All right, Brad, back to you.
Andy, thank you so much for all the work tonight and over the past couple of weeks. And I think everybody can kind of witness from what you've heard this evening how incredibly proud we are of the Office of Personal Career Development and just how much of an outreach it has to all of our students. I would encourage parents for freshmen, for first-year students to take advantage of what's there, not to be afraid. I think you've heard tonight more than ever, and with the pandemic more than ever, everything's shifting and changing. So I think the opportunities that are there today may change over the next couple of years, and the best news is to be prepared and learn how to manage that system, take advantage of those things. And Andy, Heidi, Mercy, and others in that office are incredibly qualified to help and are the most enthusiastic, and why they're really part of probably one of the most outstanding offices on campus. So I want to thank Andy and our students for helping us tonight. Office of Family Engagement wants to thank everybody for being a part of it. Minta McNally, myself, and Anna Marie. Anna Marie, thank you for our producing and answering all those questions. That's just incredible to keep that information. Just one last note is that in your reminder last night for the program today, there was a direct link to an area where a website where we'll have this recorded, the session recorded. Should be up in the next week, maybe 10 days or longer with the holidays. But you can go there and be able to go back and listen to this and be able to gain that information all over again. So thank you all very much for your time. Thank everybody involved this evening. Stay safe. Enjoy your upcoming Thanksgiving. I appreciate your being a part of things. Good night.
Great.